Hello and welcome to episode 138 of Killer Hangover. I'm Bettina.
And I am Beth. Wow.
I know.
I miss this. I love this. I love doing this with you, Mom.
Yeah. You know what, honey? I love doing it with you. It's work, but even the work is interesting, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I look like a hot mess right now. I just realized I haven't even looked in a mirror before hopping
You're
down here to record.
darling.
Oh, thank you, Mom. So how have you been? I feel like, I've talked to you, but not really talked to you. Yesterday, you went off the grid. I'm assuming because you were writing your episode.
Totally. Well, I worked at the food pantry until like 12:30, from 9 to 12:30. Then I came home, started working on this, and then last night I went to something at the church. So, yeah, I was off the grid.
You were off the grid.
Your brother called me, didn't answer. It was totally unresponsive.
Okay, so episode 138.
Yes.
South
South
Carolina.
Carolina. Yes.
Yes.
Before we
I love how
start,
you say all the states. I don't even know what accent that was supposed to be. South Carolina.
a
Gosh.
little bit of European sent in there. Okay, y'all, before we start, I would like to
worse.
I would like to thank one of our long-time listeners, Melanie, for sending this story to us. I had never heard about it, and I have to tell you, I do like looking into these cases that I'm not familiar with. So
Yeah.
Melanie, thank you very much. I'm not saying your last name because I didn't get permission to do so. So
No, we got a lot of great like I posted on social media, like, give me some stories. We got a lot of stories. I was like,
we did.
yay.
We got great responses, and this is just to prove to y'all that we're going to cover those cases. So
Yes.
there you go.
I'm excited. I've already started looking into some of the cases and claimed them for my own.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Mom said,
Okay.
what state? And I was like, I don't want to give her that one. I don't want to give her that one.
Delaware. No, not that one. That's mine. Let's see.
That is exactly what happened. I am going to cover the Delaware story. I want to. Okay, so before we dive into your story, though, you're glazing right over the cocktail, Mom.
No, I just wanted to
Oh,
thank Melanie first off
Melonie's the priority. Yes, thank you,
for
Melanie.
drawing our
Appreciate
attention to
you.
this case. It's a horrible case, but they all are. So, but what's the cocktail, darling?
Okay. Thought you were just breezing right, blip,
Nope.
blah, 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 blah.
Nope.
Breezing right past it.
Blah.
Okay. This is the delicious looking cocktail. Doesn't look very delicious.
Delicious looking cocktail.
But
Doesn't look delicious.
but this is Beth's own creation.
No website needed on that one.
Nope.
Okay.
Beth's creation. Are you brave enough to try it?
Well, I can't, but I would.
Well, I can make it for you if you want me to later on. Okay, are you ready? I'm really excited. I literally like measured and tasted and tried things all last night. So I'm really excited about it. I made it up. Are you ready?
Okay, we got it.
I'm so clever. I'm so proud of myself. Okay. It's called the Buried Alive cocktail, the podcast. Actually, we could make it named something podcast. Anyway, I named it Buried Alive.
Okay, buried alive. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Oh gosh. Oh,
Okay, so this is what's in it.
that has to do with your episode portion, doesn't it? Okay, go ahead.
We have heavy whipping cream
Mm.
for the skeleton.
Mm.
You have coconut rum for the dirt. And you have melon liqueur for the grass.
Or to grass.
And then you have pineapple juice for the sunshine. Okay, you're laughing, but it tastes really good.
I believe it does, but your name with all the sunshine even buried alive.
Yeah. Yes. Zach Bagans. That is it. Okay. So it is an ounce of heavy whipping cream. And you put this in your shaker with ice.
Okay.
So your skeleton. And then you do 1.5 to 2 ounces of rum. That's your preference.
Are you doing dark rum for the dirt?
It's coconut rum. So
That's not dark.
It's
Is
not.
it?
I did 2 ounces of the coconut rum. And then for the melon liqueur, I did just an ounce of that for the grass. And then pineapple juice, pineapple juice is pretty strong. So it's how much you want.
How much
You
you
can do
like
5.
pineapple juice?
Yeah, there's like the little cans that are 6 ounces. I did about 5 ounces of that. So I shake it in a shaker with ice, strained it, and poured it into this glass and added some little ice cubes into it.
Interesting. So why the whipping cream?
It adds like a really for a skeleton. I needed a skeleton.
Could have been the ice.
No, that's the rain. I've thought this through.
Sorry.
It adds like a really smoothness to it.
Oh,
It's
it could have
good.
been egg whites too.
Ew, no, I didn't even think about that for a skeleton. My bad.
It's a lot more work than just dumping the whipping cream in there.
Yes. So that is the Buried Alive Killer Hangover podcast cocktail. Long name. Come up with a better one.
Oh, child. Sounds delish. Gotta try it.
If you try it, let me know.
We'll put that recipe in our show notes.
Oh, I'm gonna post it everywhere. I'm so proud of myself.
Never mind, it'll be everywhere.
You're gonna see it everywhere
with a picture because it looks so good.
That part doesn't look very appetizing. It looks like a milky orange juice. I don't know.
Oh well, can't have everything.
Mm-mm.
All right, are we ready?
We're ready.
Okay. I do want to advise listeners' discretion for this part of the episode. It does involve rape, sodomy, and a very violent murder. So I'm not going to go into great detail. Of course, we don't do that, but I will have to cover some of this just to stress how depraved the killer was. All right, here we go. It's November 16th, 1991 in Conway, South Carolina. Conway is about 14 miles inland from Myrtle Beach. So it's a really small kind of farming community, and not much to do for kids, the small towns. So
yeah,
there's a lot of partying going on. And then, of course, it's only 14 miles to the beach. So in the summer, there's a lot of beach action going on too.
okay.
All right. Just kind of, and I can relate to that, not necessarily as a teenager, but, I went to a very small college town as you did, same school. And it's just kind of the same thing. There's not much to do except,
Drink.
drink.
Just being honest.
All right, back to that night. It's on a Saturday. And although it's November, the temperature is pretty mild. 17-year-old Crystal Faye Todd had just finished with all her chores around the house. She just wanted to hang out with her friends. She kissed her mother, Bonnie, goodbye and headed to her car. Bonnie watched as her daughter's little blue Toyota, an early graduation gift from Bonnie, sped down the street. Just the last thing she saw was her daughter's license plate, which was a personalized license plate that read C. Todd. Crystal met up with a group of friends at the mall. Remember those days?
Yeah.
The
I
only
do.
place to go was the mall.
Again, small town. Yeah. You would just drop us off there.
Just go. Just
Just
go.
go.
Her best friend got out of work from one of the stores at the mall around 9 o'clock. And Crystal had heard about a party that was a little outside of town. So her and her friend headed to the party. Okay, now a little bit about Crystal. She was fun and outgoing, well liked at school, and above average student. She was what gave life to her mother, Bonnie, who called her a miracle child. Bonnie and her husband, Junior B, had always wanted a child, but their want was not answered until January 4th, 1974, when Bonnie was 39 years old. From the first moment the baby was placed in Bonnie's arms, she fell in love with Crystal, and Crystal became her entire life. Especially after Junior B died when Crystal was only 11 years old. Crystal grew up to be a beautiful young woman with goals to head to college after she graduated this last year of high school. She had this beautiful dark auburn hair that was really wavy, curly, and these freckles around her nose and her, she was just a really cute young woman. Okay, sorry. Crystal did most of the housework around the house, cooking and cleaning. She loved to cook. That's why she took that job upon herself. And she was like OCD when it came to, neat freak stuff. You can relate to that.
A little
So
bit.
she probably didn't even mind cleaning the house. I mean, it was just her and her mother, so it didn't get too dirty. The only thing is her mother smoked, and that was one of the things Crystal hated, was the smell of cigarette smoke. So I think that's one of the reasons she really took that job upon herself, was to clean the house out as soon as her mother's cigarette was extinguished. It was like, get to work, get that smell out of the house. Oh, she was involved in her church, singing in the choir. She loved children and was well sought after as a babysitter. But of course, Crystal was a normal teenager and there was little to do in this town. So Crystal and, they drank. That's what they did. That's what we did. I'm not condoning it. I'm just saying it, especially in the 70s and 80s. Yeah, that's the way it was. Anyway, Crystal had a slight accident on the way home. After one of these parties, she was pulled over and cited with DUI. Now, she was not charged, but her car was taken away from her for 3 months. And it was like, okay, if you learned your lesson, we're not going to charge you. But if this ever happens again, it's history. Anyway, Crystal did take this event to heart, and she never really drank again. She'd go to parties still, and if she got a beer, she would just nurse it, just basically hold it and nurse it throughout the whole night. So, on the night of November 16th, as she and her friends stood around at the party on the outskirts of town, Crystal realized this is not where she wanted to be. She wanted to kind of go back to the mall or go someplace with her other friends. But it turned out that her friend had to be home. All these kids have curfews. So her
Yeah.
friend had to be home at 11:15. And it was closing in on that time. In fact, they were just going to get to the friend's car by 11:15. So the friend was probably going to be late going home.
Uh-oh.
So Crystal dropped her off, and then she still had 45 minutes because her curfew was at 12.
Okay.
Um, so she was like, she loved her car, and one of the reasons she did because it gave her a sense of freedom.
Mhm.
And she was not going to waste that freedom that night. So she still had 45 minutes. So what else did we do? I don't know about you guys, but we that after the mall closed and everything else, what else do you do? Oh, you get in your car and you cruise. So this
All
is
right, all right, all right.
exactly. And you just go around the same route over and over again. You wave at the same people, and then you just keep once in a while you stop at a parking lot where everybody else is hanging out. Okay, let's
Oh,
go back. And you
man.
just do this. So anyway, she started doing that and
What
she
a
was
blast.
it was fun actually, but Um, so she was at a stoplight in the middle of this cruising thing, and she looked over, and her best friend, Ken, was right next to her in his car. And he goes, "Hey, you want to go cruising together?" And she's, hang out for a while. And she goes, "Yeah, I've got to be home by 12, but yeah, we have some time." He goes, "Okay, drop your car off at the high school parking lot and I'll come pick you up." So that's what she did. She left her coat and her purse and locked them up in her car and then jumped into Ken's car. Okay.
Okay.
See, I'm talking to you and I'm off script. Okay, now Ken and her had been friends since they were little kids, grade school, maybe even earlier than that. They lived about a mile away from each other, if that,
Mhm.
and just had always had a connection. Um, one source said that they did date for a little bit, but it just didn't click. Um, but Ken was still very attracted to her and had been repeatedly asking her if she wanted to go out. She just didn't feel that way about Ken. And she told her mother that, I think all he really wants is sex. And,
Mm.
she just didn't want that. That's not the relationship they had. So, a little bit about Ken. He was the all American boy next door. Blonde hair, blue eyes. He was an
I
above
mean, the
average.
perfect Ken.
Yes, he was literally Ken. Well,
Ken.
he was short, kind of stocky, so yeah. But
Yeah.
anyway, in those days he was considered really cute. He was an above average student while in high school, was a football star, was involved in his church, and was involved in the Conway community as well. So everybody knew him. Of course, it's only a community of what 10,000 or something. It was a very small, community. So
Mhm.
everybody really knew everybody. But
Sure.
if you're the star of the football team, you
Oh, you're
really,
known. Yeah.
yes, definitely, because that was a big thing. During football, that's where everybody was on that Saturday night.
Because it's a small town.
You know. Um, all around, great guy, but he had a dark side to him, and a dark side that neither Crystal or her mother Bonnie really knew about. Now, the football coach and his teammates all knew about his temper. He had a
Mm.
horrible temper, and kind of anger issues to go along with that. What a lot of people did not know, though, was he also had a record.
Oh.
Yeah. When Ken was 15, okay, 15,
Oh.
young,
Oh.
he started stalking and continuously calling a young girl. Her name was Julie, and her mother.
Oh.
So if her mother answered, he would say crude things on the phone to her, but never really threatened her. When Julie answered, he would say crude things, but he would also threaten her. And it was like, you know what I'd like to do? I'd like to rape you, and then I'd like to stab you, and I'd like to
Oh
slit
my
you, and I'd
gosh.
like to slit you open.
Oh my
And
gosh.
and he would go into graphic detail. And this continued for quite a while. And Julie and her mother went to the police and reported it. Um,
And they knew it was him?
they did, because Julie had gone to, he worked at some store, and Julie was a customer there at that store, and he had talked to her at the store and kind of came on to her, and she was like, dude, you're young, I'm young, I'm not interested in this. And so she recognized his voice when he called.
Oh.
And she was like, it's that guy that works at that store that I ran
That
into
guy
him.
from that store.
It's a guy from that store. Mom, the guy from the store.
That guy, that store.
They did
That's
report it.
scary.
They did report it to the police. Nothing was ever really done about it. And then the call stopped and life goes on. So, but there was a report, made about his frequent phone calls. 2 months before the fateful November night, Ken had been driving around the nearby campus. College campus, I'm sorry. He'd seen two female students walking. He drove alongside of them and said he was lost and he needed directions. So one of the girls leaned over to, say, where are you going, whatever. And she noticed that, well, his member was out and he was stroking it.
Okay. I wasn't gonna drink too much of this today.
As he drove off, they did get his license plate number and reported it to the police.
Yes, good.
So, I just have to, when I was in high school, I was working at Wendy's.
Oh no, where is this going?
Yeah, I was working
Oh
at
no.
Wendy's, and I was like, the person at the
No.
drive-through window.
Yes.
So this big old car, of course, a lot of people drove big cars in those days, drives up.
Boats.
This guy
Oh
literally
God.
in a trench coat,
No.
and
No.
I'm like, hi, how are you? Open the open the window. He is totally naked under the trench coat,
And he
and
opened it?
he's sitting there with it wide open. He's totally naked, and he's like, hey, how are you? And he's doing the thing,
Doing the thing.
stroking himself.
Mom, no. Okay. Doing the thing was much better. I'm sorry to have corrected you.
Yeah. That those horrible things are imprinted in your mind. It's like, you don't expect it. I want to give you your dang hamburger and I want payment for it. I don't want to see that.
Did you did you report it? You reported it? Or are you just
Actually,
traumatized?
I laughed at him.
You laughed at him.
I was like, I'm like laughing. He took off.
You should have reported him because some people wouldn't have laughed and they would have been, well, you were traumatized.
I was something because I remember it distinctly, but I couldn't
Yeah, not
help it. Maybe
traumatized,
that's what I
definitely.
do. Maybe I do in those instances. I just laugh. I don't know, but I just started laughing. It was like inconceivable to me. Like, you don't expect that.
No, fight or flight or laugh.
I picked the laugh. It embarrassed him. He was out of there. Maybe he won't do it again because he's like, well, I don't want that reaction.
I think I would laugh too. Or be like, I don't know. I think I'd fight in that situation.
You don't know what I don't know. Anyway, I had to plug that in.
Plug that in.
So this event with the college students happened or was being looked at the night of the 16th when the two friends got together. So there was actually going to be a trial, and he was going to be convicted of indecent exposure, but they were getting all their facts together and stuff. So
Oh,
it was being looked at into.
and I'm assuming Crystal had no idea.
No, no. And she didn't know about the 15 when he was 15 years old, and either did her mother Bonnie. I mean, Ken was at their house all the time.
Mm.
So didn't know about it. Okay. Now after Crystal got into his car, again, the detectives kind of put that together and they're supposing this is what happened. That's what Ken said happened. Um, we don't know what happened after that. Only Ken
Oh
knows
gosh.
the true story of what happened after that. Um, Bonnie was up waiting for Crystal. When midnight came and went, she got a little nervous. Crystal was always on time, always came home on time. An hour later, with Crystal still not home, Bonnie started calling her friends. No, Crystal wasn't with them, but they had seen her earlier that night at the mall, and others had seen her at the party. She even called Ken, who said he had not seen Crystal at all that night. By 3 a.m., Bonnie was frantic and she called 911. The dispatcher, a guy who knew it all, said, "Oh,
Mm.
she's a teenager. She's
Oh
probably hanging out
no.
with some friends. And, teenagers do this all the time. Maybe she drank and she doesn't want you to know about it," and
This is the
making
dispatcher?
all this up.
Oh my
He goes,
gosh.
"Why don't you give it a few more hours and then call back?" Okay, but of course Bonnie's like, "No, that's not Crystal. She's not going to do that." But he said, just give it some time. Okay. So then it was 8 a.m. Bonnie called 911 again. This time, probably a different dispatcher. This time, the police did respond and came to the house to ask questions. Not an hour later, 911 got another call, and this time from two hunters who were out on this, in the country on this dirt road. They were deer hunters, and they stated they were driving along an obscure dirt road and they saw what looked like a deer in the ditch. They stopped to see whether it was dead or whatever, and they realized that it wasn't a deer, it was a young woman. Um, her body was just covered with blood.
Mm.
So they called, of course, police right away. Police rushed to the site, and there was a lot of blood on one side of the road, dirt road, and then what looked like bloody drag marks to the other side of the road and then into the ditch. Okay, and the body was literally in this ditch.
Okay.
The body, okay. The woman's pants were loosened and unzipped and kind of pulled down along her hips. Her shirt was ripped and her bra was pulled up, exposing her breasts. This looked to be a sexual assault, but there was so much more. Her face was bloodied because of the many stab wounds to her head and face. Her throat had been sliced or slit twice, so she had a very large gash in her throat. She had been partially disemboweled. This was one of the most brutal killings many of the police and investigators had ever seen and were ever to see. In fact, there were a lot of people who literally got sick at the scene. It was so gruesome.
I can imagine.
The
That
police
sounds awful.
the police chief was not certain who the victim was. He was kind of wondering if this wasn't Crystal. And then he was proved right when her hand was kind of underneath her body. And when her hand was pulled out, there was a class ring on her finger. So they took the class ring off, and inside it was engraved Crystal Faye Todd. So, what do you have to do now? You have to notify the mom, who he happened to know. Bonnie
Oh my
was
gosh.
devastated. She had no reason to continue living. Her reason had been murdered. Friends of Bonnie, as well as Crystal's friends, were at Bonnie's side visiting, bringing food, or just holding her hand. One of the people who visited most every day, or called if he couldn't be there, was Ken. Crystal's dear close friend, Ken, who Bonnie liked very much. Ken, who was actually a pallbearer at Crystal's funeral. Then one day, while Ken was visiting Bonnie, she noticed he was a little bit nervous. He told her that police had taken DNA samples from all of Crystal's male friends. Ken had no idea what DNA was or how it could be used. Now, remember, this was 1991.
Sure.
DNA
Like when it was
was used at the time, but had just started and it had
yeah.
never been used in South Carolina. Okay. Yeah.
And small like districts and stuff like that, yeah. Especially.
So, interestingly, the DNA taken at the scene and by the medical examiner came from a donor with O blood type, along with a rare enzyme that's called PGM. I am not going to repeat the scientific name, because I'd slander it, so I didn't even write it down. Now, PGM is very uncommon. Only about 2% of the population carry it, or 1 in 250 million people. So
What
it's
is
very
it?
rare. It's an enzyme that males could carry in their sperm. So
Okay.
an FBI profiler then put a profile of the killer together. Now profiling was kind of new at that time too,
Mm-hmm.
but he was kind of right on. This is just some of his profile. White male in his early 20s. This was someone Crystal knew and most probably considered a friend. This person lived within a 3-mile radius of the Todd's home.
How do you come up with that? That's so crazy.
Yeah. Well, considered a friend, that was because everybody said Crystal would never get into the car with a
I
stranger.
get that one, but how do you know the 3-mile radius?
I don't know. I'm not a profiler, but I wish I was, because that just sounds so interesting.
Fascinating.
Okay, it was because of this profile that the investigators asked for DNA samples of all of Crystal's male friends. Okay. I think there were around 57 samples taken in all. It took a little while to test all the samples, but they did have to test all of them. But they didn't have to test all of them because donor number 44 hit 9 points out of 9 points in the DNA tests. And that is
Okay.
also very rare. What's most common is like you'll hit 5 or 6 points on that DNA test or sample,
Mm-hmm.
but he hit all 9. Boom, 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 boom. This was definitely their killer. And his name, Ken Register, who was her best friend. But Ken had an alibi. He was with his 15-year-old girlfriend. Now, Ken's 18.
Okay.
He was with
Still
his
weird.
15-year-old girlfriend at a go-kart center outside of town. His girlfriend's parents ran the go-kart center. And at first she said that he stayed there and he didn't leave until 11:15, 11:30. His mother then stated that Ken was home at 12 and did not leave the house after he arrived home. Now, this just didn't make any sense. The DNA was screaming that it was Ken who killed Crystal, yet he had this alibi from these 2 women.
Somebody's lying.
Ken was taken in for questioning. Now, as you can probably put together, he lived at home with his parents. I never read anything about his father, so I don't know if his father lived there or didn't exist anymore. I have no idea, but I never read anything about his father, just as he was a mommy boy. The whole time he was in for questioning, he asked for his mama. Can my mama come in? I want my mama to be sitting here. Where's my mama? Where's my mama? Yeah. No, dude. You're 18. Suck it up. You're not going to get your
You're
mama to be
an
sitting here.
adult. Yeah.
She's sitting here next to you. His mother, however, did send a note to him. While he was being questioned, the investigator read the note. He didn't show the note, he read the note. Now, the note
Okay.
actually said, keep your mouth shut until we get a lawyer. Okay.
Yeah.
That is not what the detective read.
Oh.
He read, son, tell the cops everything. Come clean.
I'm so confused. Wait, so what did the note actually say?
Keep your mouth shut until we get a lawyer.
But the
But the
cop read it
cops, mhm.
and
Now,
lied to him
this
and said
is legal. This is legal
to lie about what you read in a note from somebody
to, yes.
to the
It's not
suspect?
coercion because you're not like in their face going, you did it, that type of thing.
Oh my
It's
gosh.
it's it's legal. I
Okay, so
mean,
what happened? I'm
okay.
on the edge of my
Well,
seat.
mama is saying, come clean, man, come clean. He's a mama's boy. He does everything his mama says. So he was like, okay. He came clean. He told him his story,
Oh my gosh.
but this was his story. We ran across each other at the stoplight and decided to hang out. Crystal parked her car and got into mine. We drove out into the country and had consensual sex. After which, Crystal realized that Ken had not worn a condom. She exploded, saying that if she found out she was pregnant, she would accuse Ken of raping her. She got out of the car and just kept cutting him down and yelling at him and just kept going on and on. Remember, Ken has a short fuse. So Ken said he grabbed his knife. Before he realized what he was doing, he got out of the car, came behind her, and started stabbing her. That's his story.
I mean, she
Then
was brutally stabbed. This story doesn't seem real to me, but if it was, like, she was brutally attacked before he knew what he was doing. Like, not just one stab, like, he went crazy.
when he came out of his craziness and realized what he had done, he was like, oh crap, I gotta hide her body. So he dragged it across the road and dumped it. Now, that was another thing that the profiler said. This was his first kill. He'd never killed before. So, okay, now at his trial, the medical examiner had a complete different story. A story that actually, Crystal told her with her body. The sex was by no means consensual. Crystal had semen in every orifice, and she had severe bruising between her thighs and her anus. She had defensive wounds on her left hand, which was kind of odd because Crystal was right-handed. But the examiner had an explanation. Crystal had been stabbed on the left side of her head, so hard that the blade went through her skull and into her brain, basically paralyzing the right side of her body.
Oh my gosh, this poor girl.
She had been stabbed 35 times, and in the middle of her torso, and the middle of her torso had been partially slit, causing the disembowelment. Most of the stab wounds showed that she had been alive, but some showed no blood, meaning she was stabbed even after she was dead. Ken had 2 trials. The first being the exposure one, and he was found guilty. Now, the prosecutor did this on purpose because this way he could kind of show what Ken, he was a sexual deviant. Now, had that not been tried before this murder trial, he couldn't have used it, because it was still.
I see.
So
Yeah.
the prosecutor was like, no, go ahead. That happened first. You go ahead and have that trial first. So he was found guilty. On the stand, Ken's girlfriend recanted her story and said that Ken left the go-kart center early.
Mhm.
He was really antsy the whole night, and he didn't is like he got to the go-kart place, he was antsy, he wanted to leave, and she's like, "No, I wanna stay, my friends are here." She's 15 years old.
Yeah.
I wanna stay, my friends are here, I wanna ride the go-karts," and he's like, "No, no, let's go back into town, let's fool around, whatever." She's like, "No, I'm staying here." So, he left her, which was fine because that was her parents' go-kart center, so her parents, were there. Um so he did not stay there until 11:15. He left much earlier.
Hmm.
Now his mother stood by her original story. Bonnie, Crystal's mother, in an interview on Forensic Files, season 7, episode 5, the name was The Alibi, said that when Ken went home that night, he must have been just covered in Crystal's blood.
Had to have been.
I mean, all what he did must have been covered. Maybe his mother was in bed and she didn't see him come in, but if she did see him come in and helped him cover up the horrible murder,
Well,
then
then, like, what
she
did he even do with
also
the clothes
clothes, that's
afterwards
what I thought
too?
too.
Like, it's
Then
not
she
just
also has Crystal's blood on her hands as well.
Mhm.
I don't know. Maybe he burned his clothes. Maybe his mother really didn't see them. Maybe she just supposed he came home at 12. But as close as they seemed like they were, and it didn't seem like he could think on his own, I think he would have
Because I'm
gone
like,
to
what
his
did he
mother.
even if he snuck in and she didn't see him, like, what did he do with the clothes after that? Like,
Well, he might have burned them or something, but I don't know. I want my mama to be sitting next to me. I want my mama here. What did my
it's
mama
because
say?
she knew
So,
something.
well, and I don't think he could think on his own. I don't
Really?
think that, I think he was just like, what should I do? What should I do? I think his mother knew, personally. I think his mother knew
Mhm.
exactly what had happened. The jury took under 2 hours to agree on a guilty verdict. The sentence was not death because he was 18 years old,
Mm. Yeah.
but instead life in prison. And again, it was because he was 18 years old. But I mean, personally, I'm going, so what? I mean, he took someone's life. He must have been old, and I mean, he was old enough to do that. Anyway, that's just me. Unfortunately, life in prison in 1992 meant there was a chance of parole.
Mm.
Today,
Of
someone
course.
gets life in prison, there is no
You don't
parole.
get parole. Yeah.
If it's life in prison with no parole, that's what it is.
Mhm.
Back then, it wasn't like that. So, okay. So his parole hearing, actually the first one, was in February 2022, at which time he waived his rights to a hearing.
Oh,
His next
interesting.
hearing will be in 2024, so next year.
So it's every 2 years.
Ugh. Ken Register is one man who I pray is never released from the bars that hold him. I mean, who knows what else he could be capable of? There's many people who think that had he not been caught with the DNA evidence, had he not been caught, he would have turned into a serial killer, a
Mm.
serial rapist, serial killer. Just a side note, Bonnie Todd joined her beloved daughter in death in September 2014. Her pain, loss, and heartache finally put to rest. If you wanted to dive deeper into this case with all the details, there's a book that you should check out. It's called An Hour to Kill, a true story of love, murder, and justice in a small southern town. It was written by Dale Hudson and Billy Hills. They did a lot of research into this and interviewed a lot of people. So they share all that in the book. And again, I'll put that in our episode notes.
That was intense. So what did prosecution set up as, like, the timeline of kind of what happened? So she got into his vehicle when they saw each other at the light, and then
Probably got into his vehicle around, she dropped her friend off, so probably between 11:30 and quarter to 12. somewhere
Mhm.
between there. They drove out, and I think he was
So then
actually,
his mom's lying too because she said he was home by
of course she's
midnight.
lying. Of course. His curfew, he actually had a curfew. His curfew was like 12 or 12:30.
And she
18
said he
years
was
old and
home
he
by
had a
12.
curfew.
Well, he's
I
living
thought
at
that was
home.
funny.
That's respectful. Yeah.
Whatever mama says.
Interesting. I mean,
So
based on the title of that book, it was done like
within
in an
an hour.
hour.
Yeah.
That's horrible.
Horrible, horrible attack. That one, which was probably the first stab wound. I'm just guessing here, but in the side of her skull was done with such ferocity that it went into her skull.
Into her brain.
And so it was like, well, I'm sorry, I didn't put this down, but it was like a hunting knife that had a lock on it. So the blade couldn't just, like a Swiss Army knife, it couldn't just slip down. It was locked in place. It was like a hunting knife, serrated hunting knife. And when they searched his house, they did find a box for that exact kind of knife in his house, but it was empty because he said that he tossed the knife.
Why?
That night after he
that
killed
night?
her. That night, he said he
did
told
fess
them
up
that
to it.
he
That's right.
dumped her body into the ditch and then he tossed the knife. And he would go over to Bonnie's house every day and just be her companion and her solace, and just to be with her, but probably also to hear how the investigation was going.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. They say that the killers are like stick around and show up at the funerals and everything too.
He was a pallbearer. That's sick.
Sick.
I read someplace that 1,500 people showed up at her viewing.
Oh. That was a sad one. Thanks, Melanie.
No, seriously, thanks, Melanie. It was, these things I think you can't forget it, especially with his parole coming up. You can't forget what a monster he is. And I'm sorry, I know prison's supposed to reform you, blah, 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 but makes you wonder why he declined the parole.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like he knew something about himself, or
and the lawyer, even his lawyer, thought it was interesting because he said the first parole hearings, the people never get off. It's like sort of a parole hearing, but people are never released after that parole hearing.
Sure.
So
like a courteous.
That's why he almost, yeah. And that's why he thought it was even he thought it was strange that he declined the hearing.
Yeah. Maybe he's content in prison.
Or he's found out something about himself and he decided he needs to stay locked up. I don't know.
Yikes. Well, are we ready to move on?
Yes. You're going to bring us up. Not with the name of your drink, we're not.
Well, again, thank you, Melanie. And gosh, sorry, that one was really tough. Okay. Okay, well, because of my cocktail's name, I'm sure you all know, can assume the topic I'm covering.
Buried alive.
Mom gave me the idea. We covered some bits of this in our Patreon episode last week, and kind of stuck with me. Sorry, patrons. Y'all get to hear more insight into the wonders of being buried alive.
Oh, God. I just cringe. That is one of the things that just, like, I feel like I can't breathe.
Waking up in a tight space.
It just makes
And
me just mm,
no, no. And I think I've told the story before about how we were in one of those like lock in, you're
mm.
locked in and you're trying to get out rooms.
It's
Why
called
can't I?
locked,
No, it's like, yeah.
locked in or
Anyway,
locked. Yeah.
anyway, and Katie, I was doing it with my sister, Katie, and the bed lifted up and it's a coffin, and you have to get in and close somebody had to get in and have the coffin be closed on top of them. And then when you did that without knowing what was going to happen, a false bottom would drop and you rolled into another room. So anyway, just the fact that she was like, I'll get in. I know. That's like one of my biggest fears. It wasn't
That,
even
uh,
somebody has to get in the coffin. I'm like in the corner on the other side of the room, like,
uh-uh.
not me.
Mm-mm. We lose this game right now because
Yeah.
I'm not getting in there.
Nope. Mm-mm. So cases of being accidentally buried alive date back to the 14th century when the body of philosopher John Duns Scotus was found outside of his coffin, his hands bloodied from trying to get out. So from the 14th century to as recent as 2014, when
Oh,
a woman was buried, she was believed to have died from cancer. She was buried by her family, and this happened in Greece. Locals started to hear screams and knocks coming from the cemetery after her burial, but they couldn't really track like who it was, where it was coming from, if it was even coming from the ground. Like they were just hearing these noises. She was later exhumed and discovered by the coroner that she ended up dying from a cardiac arrest
oh God.
from being buried alive, not cancer, as they had presumed.
Oh my gosh.
Now, what drew me to this joyous topic,
Yeah. What did draw you? Because
I
it,
can't just
oh,
blame mom, but upon researching haunted places in South Carolina, I came across the story of Julia Laguerre. And well, that's the story I'm going to share with you guys today.
all
Julia's
right.
story Julia's story begins on Edisto Island. And if there are some of you that have been following the Murdoch trials and all that crap, then you may recognize the name. Edisto Island is where Alec Murdaugh had his beach house. So not the house where he killed his wife and son, but the other home that he
Okay.
had. So in case you've been following all of that crap, you might recognize Edisto Island. It's about 40 miles south of Charleston. It's a smaller area. It's beach and farming land. At first, it was used for fishing camps for the local indigenous people back in the day. And as the European colonists moved in, farming began. After the revolution, the area started growing and selling Sea Island cotton. It's a very luxurious, silky cotton.
Hmm.
It was very expensive. It was had like extra long fibers. I read that it was pretty comparable to like Egyptian cotton because it had long fibers and it's just very silky soft.
Okay. This is
And it
how
had
stupid I am. I never thought of cotton as being anything but cotton.
so I didn't okay, not stupid. I've never dove into the topic of cotton before,
No,
but I guess there's different cotton plants, which would make sense because
that
like
makes
Egyptian
it
cotton.
makes total sense. It makes total
Yeah.
sense. I just never, yeah.
So this sea cotton. Sorry, what was the name of it? What did I say the name of it was?
Sea breeze or
Sea Island.
seaside.
Sea Island cotton has long fibers similar to like Egyptian cotton. And so it's very silky. And the Europeans, it was in high demand for the Europeans.
Mm.
So, of course, that they had to keep growing it. And I lost my place. It's a very lucrative crop, high demand in Europe. Okay, therefore, the wealthy lived out there on Edisto. So they'd have a couple houses probably, but Edisto became known as like where the wealthy would live and they'd have the plantations out there.
Mm.
And then they might have like a house in town in Charleston or what have you, but very, very wealthy people lived on in Edisto Island. And like I said, the plantations were out there. And as American history goes, these wealthy plantation owners lived by the wealth made on the backs of slaves. according to the podcast Lore I listened to on the subject, in 1790, out on Edisto Island, there was 1,692 slaves, and there were 223 white people.
Oh, geez.
Yes. After the Civil War, this increased to over 5,000 slaves.
Oh my gosh. On this little island?
Mm-hmm. One of the most profited plantation owners out there was William Seabrook. And I get sidetracked a lot, so I'm gonna take you with me. I don't know if you guys are like me, so if you're not, I'm sorry. But when I heard like Edisto Island, I was like, oh, the Murdoch trials. Like I kind of get sidetracked. So when I heard Seabrook and Seabrook Plantation, does anything come to mind for you? Probably not. The Notebook came to mind for me because the whole story happens in Seabrook, which is a fictional sit town. I read, unfortunately. I kind of got excited, but it's fictional. Sorry, guys. But anyway, sorry, side note. Anyway, William Seabrook. He's one of the wealthiest men out on Edisto. And fun fact, his plantation, Seabrook Plantation, still stands there today. It's beautiful, but the fun fact is that it was designed in 1810 by James Hoban. Do you know who that is?
No.
He designed the White House in Washington, D.C.
Oh,
So this plantation is pretty fancy.
yeah.
William had a daughter named Georgiana Seabrook. There's not much on her early years, except she was born to Elizabeth and William Seabrook November 18th, 1829, and then she got married in 1848 to John Berwick Legree. You know, the important facts.
Okay.
Born and married. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. John was a plantation owner as well, and the two started a family. The next known date was when she was 22. In 1852, Julia went home to Edisto to visit family, and she had a really sore throat. And then this progressed to a bad cough, and then a fever, and then her throat actually started to close.
Oh,
Started to swell, and she really had a hard time breathing. The doctor came out with the diagnosis she had gotten diphtheria,
oh,
which death is inevitable with diphtheria. Soon, Julia fell into a very deep coma, and not long after that, the doctor found no signs of life and deemed her dead. The family prepared her body for burial pretty much right away because, like, the day that he deemed her that she was dead, they prepared her for burial right away because diphtheria is contagious and they didn't want anybody else getting it. I didn't know
of
diphtheria was
course.
contagious. I don't know why. I don't know much about diphtheria.
I don't know much either.
I know it's like
Well, now you know that it constricts your throat.
it can, yeah, and you die. So don't
And you
get
have
it.
a cough and you die.
Um, and they're also in South Carolina, so it's really hot and humid and gross, and the body will decompose really quick, and they don't want that sitting around their house. So they have to prepare her body very quickly.
I don't want that sitting around their house.
No, nobody's got time for that. She was dressed in her favorite gown and laid to rest in the family's mausoleum on Edisto Island's Presbyterian Church. The family said their goodbyes and slid the large marble door closed and locked as they left. Not
Can I
long.
ask you something?
Yes.
When people are buried in mausoleums, they're not put in coffins, are they?
She was put in a coffin and like in the wall then, not like cemented in the wall, but probably like on a shelf
Yeah, but
on the wall.
they're put in coffins, or
Yeah.
maybe
They
sometimes
can
they're
be. Yeah, sometimes they do,
okay.
sometimes they don't.
Okay.
So she was put in the mausoleum and then they closed up the mausoleum. And I believe this mausoleum all had, because of the rest of the story, she was in a coffin. Um Plus, she had diphtheria and was found contagious. So I'm sure they tried to wrap that up, right?
I don't know. All I know is about the yellow fever that I talked about to the patrons.
Her patrons. Yeah, you're right. Okay, so she's buried in the mausoleum. They close this heavy marble door. They leave. Not long after the burial, men of the church start hearing screams and crying coming from the cemetery at all hours of the day and night. But no one's able to pinpoint where the sounds are coming from. And the noises, the church deemed the churchyard spirit. So these people, it's just the churchyard spirit crying.
It
No
couldn't
big deal.
possibly be a person. It's got
No
to be
big
a
deal.
ghost.
No. A decade passes and the Civil War takes over the area.
And she's
Julia's
still crying?
No. The crying has ceased. So, Civil War, and her brother dies in the Civil War. So he's brought back and they're going to bury him in the mausoleum. So I lost my place again. Okay, so they prepare his body for burial. They open the family's mausoleum, but as they open the door, right in front of the door is Julia's body, crumpled in her gown that they had buried her in. Yeah, the decomposed corpse of Julia, dressed in her favorite gown, crumpled on the floor, not in the casket as she had originally been buried in.
She got out of the casket.
Scratches on the there's also scratches on the inside of the mausoleum door.
Uh,
So they rebury her in the mausoleum, and then they also bury her brother. They close and they lock the marble door. Now, Julia's family was so shook at what had happened that they're like, we're gonna go visit the mausoleum like regularly, right? Because they feel like they need to owe her some respect. So they go back that night, and the door to their mausoleum is open. And they're like, okay, that's really weird. So, and this is like a heavy marble door. It was locked. So they push it back, they close it, they lock it, they pay some respects, say some respects. I don't know, respect. And then
out of here. Stay in the coffin.
and they leave. Well, then they get called, probably not on the phone because I don't think they had phones then, but they get a message from the church saying, hey, yo, your mausoleum door is wide open. Like,
Fact.
or are you raised in a barn? Respect. They had to go out there and close the door. And again, they get called the next day. Guys,
this is getting to be ridiculous. What happened to their door? They said there was a ghost in the graveyard. Why don't they blame it on the ghost?
The door to your dead. So they go and they actually buy a whole new door. But no matter what they did, they bought a new door, locks, chains. This door just kept opening. So the family actually removed the door.
Oh.
And that's why they had to have been buried in coffins, because they're not just going to have these skeletons just laying out for people. Right? Yeah.
Who's
there? Okay. That's it. That was the story for Buried Alive.
Dang.
But the door kept opening. So that was the haunted part for the paranormal portion, was they think it was, sorry, by my mind. Just gonna talk through my thoughts right now. They think it was Julia, like not wanting to get locked in again and terrified. I mean, that's scary. So it was her spirit, like, do not leave me in here without a way out.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I have some more facts for you guys. I'm not done yet with the
subject. Okay.
So like I said, this has been happening since the 14th century, right? And people actually started getting really scared. I don't want to be buried alive. Nobody wants to be buried alive. And people started getting really scared. Like, how are we going to avoid being buried alive? So this in France, his name was Antoine Louise Louis. Yeah, he's in Paris. He had this long pipe that would administer. This is one of the first tests of death. Okay, test for death. This long pipe. And he would administer tobacco smoke enemas with his mouth to the people that were dead, I guess.
What's that supposed to do?
I
If the
don't
smoke comes out of their
know.
mouth, then they're dead or what?
That he's just blowing into this pipe enemas. Sounds like this guy had a fetish and used an excuse.
Why are you blowing smoke? Oh, that's what the saying. That's where it came from. You're blowing smoke up my
Ass.
Oh my god.
I didn't put that together.
We're so smart.
But again, like, why? What does that mean?
That means you're just
But they thought that this was working because they later created these bellows that would like push air through these pipes and put tobacco smoke in people's bums. I don't get it.
understand. If they were alive, then they go, ooh. But if they were dead, they wouldn't react. I mean, I don't understand what the tobacco smoke had to do with it.
Oh, it gets better though. The Germans have even more interesting tactics to test for death. A German
Jawohl.
doctor would electrocute his patients' faces before he buried them. Again, these sound like fetishes that people are like getting joy out of. That sounds horrible. And then you have to wonder, did somebody wake up because of that then?
I know.
A Dutch doctor would put a trumpet right up to a patient's ear and blow the trumpet.
Sorry. That was probably really loud. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I mean, but like if you're in a coma, that's not going to wake you up. Tobacco up your bum isn't going to wake you up. And electrocuting your face isn't going to wake you up.
No.
Okay. Another French doctor had this clamp that he invented that would clamp onto the patient's tongue and would pull it back and forth really violently. Another doctor, a German doctor, created a very similar clamp, except this clamp had claws. And he would clamp it onto the patient's nipples.
People do that on purpose nowadays.
More commonly was a pin prick that they would prick like big pins into their legs and arms and under their toenails.
Ugh. But still, if they were comatose.
Yeah. If you think these people are just really sleeping, like I don't but you know, this been happening for so long and they didn't really know the signs of a coma or anything like that. In the 1780s, the French doctor came up with a French community waiting mortuary. So that people would die and then they would just put all the dead in like a room, and it became known as House of the Dead. Now the Germans built upon this and actually hired on like a staff, and they'd have like this big house where staff would live in half of it, and then they'd have rooms, just the corpse room filled with the dead. They would have, mom talked about this with patrons, but in these corpse rooms with all these dead people, they would tie strings to bells so that the staff could go and check on these corpses in these rooms. But when the body decomposes, it moves. It releases gases. It moves, and so these bells were going off all the time. So it was kind of not, because then a bell goes off, and they're like, so they all go into the corpse room. But what bell went? Like it just gross. And then, can you imagine if you really were in a coma and you wake up in a corpse room? I think, oh.
Why didn't they just like hold a mirror underneath their nose?
That sounds so much easier than blowing a trumpet in their ear. I
Or
don't
blowing
know.
smoke up their butt. Just hold a
Well,
mirror under their nose.
then it became a money thing, and so they started creating these separate rooms for the wealthy, these like grand rooms that they you could
So
pay
just in case they
extra.
did wake up, they'd be among.
You could pay extra so that if your corpse is not really a corpse and it wakes up, at least it's in a fancy room.
Oh my gosh.
So these corpse rooms were stinky and gross, and like there was diseases and everything that was because of these. So they started to shut them down, and burial was the preferred option. But oh my gosh, if we bury them, we're burying them alive. And so this German Duke Ferdinand, he created a security coffin, and it had like, let's call it a sunroof, but it had like a glass sunroof. It had vents.
Wow.
It had, oh shit, I lost. So yeah, sunroof, vents, and a lock on the inside so that
Oh.
you could unlock it and get out of your own
But you're
coffin.
still in the ground.
Yeah. But you have vents. So that's,
Yeah,
I
but you
mean,
can't get
you
out of
last
the
a
dang
little
thing.
longer. Yeah, you can't push it up. Yeah, wow. He didn't think that through. Um, let's see. Another German added feeding tubes to some coffins.
Because
Speaking.
that's what I'm concerned about. If I'm suffocating to death, feed me.
Give me a smoothie.
I need a sandwich down here.
Well, they installed speaking trumpets so you could place your order for the feeding tube a little easier.
Doo, doo, doo.
No, speaking, like, not a speaking trumpet so you can talk. Help me. My name is Beth Thompson, and I've been buried alive.
Bring a sandwich.
So they had, again, the strings with the bells,
Mhm.
but those weren't accurate, and nobody would really hear these little bells going off. So then they would actually, some smaller communities would tie ropes to the dead, and the ropes would go to the bell tower. So can you imagine you're sleeping and you hear the bell tower going off? How terrifying.
Not another one. Gee, I don't think it ever did, Beth. That would take so much strength to pull that rope, to ring a huge bell. You're in a
So
coffin.
sad.
You're
That's
just
so
waking up.
sad.
Like you have the strength to pull on
But I
this.
guess it set everybody else who was already alive at peace that
It
if this
never
person does
rang.
wake up, they're just stupid. They just didn't ring the damn bell. But you wouldn't know because it's not like you're going to exhume all these people to make sure that they're dead.
Oh my
Okay, so I
gosh.
have one more South Carolina story for you all about somebody being buried alive. South Carolina, you had a few. Essie Dunbar, she was 30. She suffered from epileptic seizures, and one set her in 1915 into a horrible coma, and she just didn't wake up. The doctor could not find any sign of life, and she was declared dead. She was prepared for burial, and her sister lived pretty far away, and it was going to take her a while to get there to travel home for the burial. And she wanted to wait for her sister to be buried so she could say goodbye and see her face. She wanted to see her face. So the family decides to wait a day to let her sister come. The body is, again, decomposing quickly because of the heat and everything else. That they're, come on, sis, let's go. The sister did not arrive on the deadline, and Essie was buried. Now at the service, they drop down the coffin, they throw 2 scoops of dirt, and then
Two
Essie's sister.
scoops, two tablespoons of dirt.
It's 2 ounces of rum, 2 scoops of dirt. Oh, and Essie's sister shows up and she starts crying and begging, please, I want to see my sister's face. I need to see my sister's face. I need to say goodbye. I need to see my sister. So begrudgingly, they raise up the coffin. They open it. Essie Dunbar smiles and sits up. It says, hello.
Respect.
Some stories even said the minister was so terrified that he tumbled into the grave and people
on
fell.
top of her. She's
No,
still
they
at the
brought her
grave.
up. They brought her up. He fell in and people ran away. And she's sitting there smiling, saying, hello. He
Well, you
lived
said
for
when was this?
1915.
1915. So they didn't embalm people at that
Mm-mm.
time. Okay.
They did not embalm people at that time. She lived for another 47 years.
Get out of town. Oh my
Get out of town.
gosh. Get out of the grave. Wow.
Respect.
Man.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that crazy? The sister,
Crazy.
like,
It's like she knew.
she knew something.
But this is my like little, moment. So the whole time they were dropping down the casket, and you sit up and smile and say hello. The whole time they're dropping down the casket, are you just sitting there like, okay, sis, you gotta get here soon. They gotta open this casket. Like, are you just like
No, she just woke up when she heard her sister sobbing.
no.
That's my version.
Okay. A little better.
Go with that. Well, I mean, it was not uncommon, probably here in the States too, but I know in Europe, to have a deceased uh, member of the family in the parlor or in the family room
Mm-hmm.
in a
For the
coffin, in
viewing.
an
Yeah.
open coffin for days.
Yeah. Ugh.
So, and my grandmother, I I mean, it wasn't uncommon either to have pictures. So my grandmother, I remember her showing me pictures of her niece or somebody who had been hit by a car.
Oh
So
my gosh.
she had all this scrapes and
Well,
cuts and stuff all over her.
geez. But
And
like
she
back in the
was
day,
in their house for a few days.
they even posed in pictures with their dead.
Oh, yeah.
Those pictures of the
But some of
children
them
and
are
stuff,
really hard to tell whether they're dead or
really
not
hard to
because
tell. And
everybody's like,
yeah, they have for those listening, sorry. You missed out on
everybody's straight faced. So
well, yeah, everybody posed like that for pictures. Nobody ever smiled for pictures, but
it's
then
really hard to tell
they were like
the
propped
dead
up
people.
on like wooden beams to hold them up to sit or stand, and weird.
So weird.
People are weird.
Well, don't be blowing smoke up of my. I bet you anything that's where that saying comes from.
I didn't even put that together when I was writing up these notes. I was just like, that's weird. Now that makes sense. It still
That's
doesn't
not
make sense.
that's not a little weird. That's a lot weird.
Oh boy. Well,
Okay.
okay. Well, that was episode 138.
Uh that was a good time laughing.
Mom, thanks again for doing the true crime 2 weeks in a row. That
Not
was
a problem.
helpful for me. I was able to get this written up and then an episode for patrons for next week.
Oh, phew, good. All
Don't worry,
right.
we're not letting you guys down. If you're not a member on Patreon, please join us. There's a link in the description of this episode that's going to send you to all of our sites, our website for all of our resources, YouTube, in case you're not watching on YouTube already. If you want to, please subscribe, like, follow, all the things.
Please.
Then it gosh, it shows you where our Patreon is. It shows you our Instagram, our Facebook, links if you want to buy us a drink. Thank you in advance if you do. Yeah, so please check that out. Follow us wherever you're listening on your podcasts and leave us a review if you have time.
Please bumps us up in the charts, and that's what we want.
So thank you guys for listening. Mom, do you have anything to say before I cheers? Yeah.
Before you cheers me. No, again, I want to thank our patrons and our followers for sticking with us. And I'm so happy to be
Our
back on. And
followers. That makes
our,
it sound like we're a cult. Thank you to our followers.
our fellow what do you call it?
I do not call them ovarians. Oh my gosh. I called them hangoveries. But then my sister so lovingly pointed out that it sounds like I'm calling you all ovaries. So again, just blow some smoke up your bum. I don't know. Our
Yeah,
hangover,
I don't
our
think we
hangover
can shorten
followers.
our yeah, there you go.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
It was a good one, Mom. Cheers, Mama.
Thanks for making me laugh. I love you, kid. Cheers.